A multiverse world faces invasion. A human team finds a portal and uncovers a secret about time. Kallaran had been a peaceful, thriving world for centuries. Located in the far reaches of the galaxy, it was a place of serene beauty, known for its vast forests, endless seas, and towering mountain ranges that dotted the landscape like ancient sentinels. The inhabitants of Kallaran, a species of peaceful intellectual beings, had lived in harmony with their planet for millennia. They were a curious species, always looking toward the stars, studying the vastness of the universe in hopes of understanding. But that serenity was shattered without warning. It began with a rumble, a low, deep vibration that pulsed through the ground, causing the inhabitants to stop in their tracks and look toward the sky. The air seemed to thicken as though the very atmosphere was shifting. And then came the sound, a deep, resonating hum, almost like the roar of an enormous engine, reverberating across the landscape. A tear in the fabric of space itself opened above Kallaran, and through it the Havan fleet poured into the skies like a swarm of locusts, descending on a field of crops. The fleet was unlike anything the people of Kallaran had ever seen before. Massive ships with sleek, jagged edges that seemed to distort the very light around them. They were ships designed for war, built with technology far beyond anything the Kallaran people had ever dreamed of. The skies darkened as the first of the Havan vessels entered the atmosphere, followed by dozens, then hundreds more. Their engines screamed as they cut through the air, and the people of Kallaran could do nothing but watch in horror. Panic spread like wildfire through the population as the ships began their descent, their weapons charging ready to unleash hell upon the unsuspecting world below. Kallaran had no defenses capable of holding off such a force. Their military was small, equipped with rudimentary weapons designed to repel minor threats, but they were no match for the advanced weapons of the Havan fleet. The defensive shields that protected the cities flickered weakly against the incoming assault, unable to hold back the overwhelming firepower. Explosions rocked the surface of the planet as the Havan ships unleashed their first volley, turning the peaceful world into a war zone in. Lena Arcan, the head of the Kallaran Research Center, stood in her office staring at the view screen with disbelief. She had never witnessed anything like this before. The city below her was in chaos. People were running in every direction, trying to escape the destruction. The military was already mobilizing, but it was clear that their efforts were futile. The Havan ships were simply too powerful. How could this happen? Lena muttered to herself, her mind racing. How did they find us? It had been centuries since Kallaran had any significant contact with other civilizations. The planet had been left alone, largely forgotten by the greater galaxy. There had been no indication that anyone was aware of their existence, let alone that they would come under attack. And yet here they were fighting for survival against an enemy they knew nothing about. Lena's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden alarm. A red light flashed above her desk, signaling an emergency. She looked down at the display screen and saw a message from Jorik Mann, the planet's military commander. "Director Arcan, the enemy fleet is overwhelming us," the message began. "We need to evacuate the civilians immediately. The defenses are failing and we are unable to hold them off. We request your assistance with any possible solution you can offer." Lena clenched her fists, her mind working at lightning speed. She had to do something. She couldn't just sit by and watch her people die. But what could she do? She was a scientist, not a soldier. She had no experience in warfare, no knowledge of how to fight back against an invasion of this scale. And yet she knew that she had one advantage: knowledge of the planet's history, its long-forgotten secrets, and its ancient technology. She had heard rumors of something, an artifact buried deep within the planet, something that could change the course of history. It was a long shot, but it was all she had. She needed to act fast. She turned to her assistant, a young researcher named Ilara, who had been working with her on the study of ancient artifacts. "Ilara, I need you to gather all the data on the ancient technology we've been studying." Lena said, her voice steady despite the panic that was rising within her. "There may be something we can use to stop this invasion." Ilara nodded quickly, already heading for the data terminal. Lena turned back to the view screen, watching the devastation unfold before her eyes. The sky was filled with fire as the Havan ships unleashed their weapons, and the ground trembled with each impact. The peaceful world of Kallaran was being torn apart, and Lena knew that if they didn't act soon, There would be nothing left to save. Outside, the first of the Havan troops began to land. Massive dropships descended from the sky, and the ground was soon covered with soldiers armed and ready to engage. Their armor gleamed under the light of the distant sun, their weapons raised in preparation for the assault. They were not here to negotiate, to discuss, or to seek peace. They were here for one reason: conquest. Kallaran had been caught off guard, and the planet's fate now rested in the hands of a small group of researchers led by Lena Arcan. They had to find a way to fight back, to survive, and to protect everything they had worked so hard to build. But as the Havan troops began to move into the cities, Lena knew that time was running out. Every second brought them closer to annihilation. She had no choice but to take the risk and try to activate the ancient artifact, the mysterious technology that might be their only hope. Lena turned back to Ilara, who was now surrounded by data pads searching for any clues that could help them. The future of Kallaran depended on what they could find, and Lena hoped against hope that something, anything, would be there to guide them. "We don't have much time," Lena said, her voice sharp with determination. "If we don't figure this out soon, we're going to lose everything. We need to find that artifact, and we need to do it fast." Ilara's eyes were wide with fear, but she nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Together, they would have to fight back against an overwhelming enemy, and the clock was ticking. The battle for Kallaran had only just begun. Lena Arcan's mind raced as she stared at the chaotic scenes unfolding on the screens before her. The battle for Kallaran was rapidly spiraling out of control. The Havan fleet, relentless and overwhelming, had decimated the planet's defenses. The few remaining military forces were struggling to hold the line, but it was becoming increasingly clear that they stood no chance. Despite the grim reality unfolding before her eyes, Lena knew she had no time to waste. Every second was critical. Every moment that passed brought her people closer to annihilation. She had one chance, one slender thread of hope that she couldn't afford to ignore. If she didn't act fast, everything they had worked for would be lost. "Ilara," Lena said sharply, her voice filled with urgency, "have you found anything yet?" Ilara, her assistant, sat hunched over a terminal, her fingers flying across the keys as she frantically searched through the data. The sound of the keyboard clicking echoed through the room, a sound that had once been comforting, but now felt like an agonizing reminder of the race against time. The hum of the emergency alarms in the background only added to the tension, each moment stretching longer than the last. "I'm checking everything we've gathered on the ancient ruins," Ilara replied, her voice tight with stress. "But nothing in the archives matches this. I'm running out of time." Lena's eyes flicked to the screen displaying the position of the Havan fleet. The enemy ships were closing in faster than anticipated, their weapons charged and ready. They didn't have much time left. The fate of Kallaran rested entirely on what Lena could discover in the ancient ruins beneath their feet. "Keep searching," Lena urged, her voice steady, despite the storm brewing within her. "We're running out of options." So, as Ilara continued her work, Lena's mind returned to the ancient texts and records she had studied in the past. She had heard stories, rumors of a mysterious space gate hidden beneath the surface of Kallaran, an artifact from a time long before the formation of the Galactic Alliance. The gate, if it truly existed, had the potential to open a rift to unknown regions of space, potentially reaching far-flung civilizations or advanced forces that could come to their aid. The thought of the gate filled Lena with a mix of hope and dread. It was a last-ditch effort, a gamble, but it was all they had. If they could find it, activate it, perhaps they could open a portal for reinforcements to arrive. The idea of reaching out to unknown forces terrified Lena, but it also held a glimmer of possibility. In the midst of devastation, she could feel a faint thread of hope pulling her toward a solution. She turned back to Ilara, her eyes narrowed in determination. "Ilara, are you sure about the location?" "The last known records suggest the gate was buried deep beneath the mountain range to the north." Ilara paused, looking up from her terminal, her face pale but focused. "Yes, the data we have indicates that the gate is in that area. It's been dormant for centuries, but the readings, they match." Lena took a deep breath. This was it. They didn't have the luxury of time to investigate further, but they had no choice. If the gate existed, it was their only hope. "Prepare a team," Lena ordered, her voice cutting through the tension. "We leave in 20 minutes. We need to get to the gate and activate it as soon as possible." Ilara nodded quickly and began to gather the necessary equipment. Lena walked briskly to the door, her mind already focused on the mission ahead. It was risky, dangerous, but there was no other choice. She had to believe in the possibility that this ancient technology could be the key to saving her people. Outside, the wind howled as the first signs of the impending storm rolled in. The sky, once filled with the sun's golden light, had darkened the air, thick with the anticipation of a coming battle. The ground shook occasionally from the impacts of the ongoing assault, but Lena kept her focus. She had trained for years as a scientist, but now she was a leader in the fight for Kallaran's survival. The team assembled quickly, each member carefully checking their gear. Lena surveyed them with a sharp eye. They were the best minds, the brightest scientists and engineers Kallaran had to offer. If anyone could find and activate the gate, it would be them. As they set out for the northern mountains, Lena couldn't help but feel a strange sense of foreboding. The weather was growing colder, the sky darkening with ominous clouds. The wind howled louder now, a mournful cry in the distance. The sense of urgency weighed heavily on her shoulders, but she knew she had no other choice but to press forward. The journey was arduous. The northern mountains were treacherous with jagged peaks and frozen ravines that made every step a challenge. The group moved carefully, each footfall deliberate, as if the earth itself were conspiring to stop them. The landscape was eerily silent, save for the sound of their boots crunching through the snow and ice. They finally reached the base of the mountains as night began to fall. The storm had intensified, reducing visibility to near zero. The group set up camp, lighting a small fire to ward off the cold. Lena sat beside the fire, her mind focused on the task ahead. They had no time to waste. Every moment was precious, and the Havan fleet was drawing closer with every passing minute. Ilara came over holding a data pad in her hands. "We're close," she said quietly. "The gate is just a few miles further up the mountain. If we push on through the night, we should be able to reach it by morning." Lena nodded, determination etched on her face. "We move at first light. Everyone gets some rest. We'll need all our strength for what's to come." As the team settled down for a brief rest, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The wind seemed to carry whispers through the trees, and the shadows around them felt unnervingly alive. But she couldn't afford to be distracted. Kallaran's future rested in her hands, and she couldn't let fear deter her now. The team worked feverishly under Lena's direction, the atmosphere thick with tension. The urgency of the situation had never been more apparent. Kallaran's fate hung in the balance, and the only hope for survival lay in the activation of the ancient space gate. The data gathered from the ruins had confirmed its existence, but Lena knew that simply finding the gate was not enough. They had to activate it, and that would not be an easy task. The gate, if it was to work, required a complex series of steps, a sequence of precise actions that had been lost to history. Lena had studied the text for years, and while she had managed to gather fragments of the necessary knowledge, the full procedure was still unclear. But there was no time for hesitation. They had to try. "Ilara, check the interface again." Lena called out, her voice tight with determination. "Is everything in place?" Ilara, her face pale from the stress, nodded as she worked at the terminal, her fingers flying over the keys. "It's all connected, Lena, but I'm still not sure if the energy output will be enough to open the gate." Lena took a deep breath, pushing aside the gnawing feeling of doubt that tried to creep into her thoughts. "We don't have a choice," she said. "The Havan fleet is closing in, and we need to make this work." As she spoke, her gaze flicked to the massive wall of rock before them, the entrance to the ancient temple that housed the gate. The mountain had long since been abandoned, the once pristine temple, now a crumbling ruin. Yet within it lay the key to their survival, if only they could figure out how to unlock it. The space gate was an ancient artifact, a relic from a time before Kallaran had become isolated. It had been built by a long-forgotten civilization whose advanced technology was far beyond anything the people of Kallaran had ever known. But despite its power, the gate had lain dormant for centuries, sealed away in the mountain's depths. The only question now was whether they could reactivate it in time. The rest of the team worked in a frenzy around Lena, each member of the group focused on their assigned task. Some worked on the console, adjusting settings and ensuring that the power conduits were aligned. Others examined the ancient texts, trying to decipher the final pieces of the puzzle that would allow them to unlock the gate's full potential. Every moment felt like a lifetime. The pressure mounted as the seconds ticked by. Lena's heart raced as she watched the team struggle to bring the gate to life, knowing that the slightest mistake could mean the end of Kallaran. They had no margin for error. Outside, the ground trembled as the Havan army advanced. Their bombardment had already begun, and Lena knew it was only a matter of time before the enemy reached the temple. She could almost hear the distant roar of their weapons, the sound of destruction drawing closer with every passing moment. "We're almost there," Lena said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "Just a little longer." Ilara didn't look up from the terminal, her face etched with concentration. "The energy readings are spiking," she said, her voice a mixture of excitement and concern. "If we push it too far, we could overload the system." Lena's mind raced. She had to make a decision, and fast. The gate had to be activated before the Havan forces arrived. But what if pushing the system too far caused a catastrophic failure? What if the gate malfunctioned and they lost their last chance at survival? "We don't have the luxury of time," Lena said, her voice firm. "Increase the power output. We can't afford to wait." Ilara hesitated, but after a brief moment she nodded and began adjusting the settings. The entire team held their breath as the energy levels soared, the hum of the machine filling the air. Lena stepped back, her eyes fixed on the glowing symbols on the gate's surface. She had seen these symbols before in the ancient texts. They were the key to the final sequence, the instructions that would unlock the gate's power. She stepped forward, reaching out to touch the symbols. As her fingers brushed against the surface, the gate rumbled to life. A low, resonating hum filled the air, and the symbols began to glow brighter. The ground beneath their feet shook, and for a moment Lena feared that the entire temple might collapse around them. But the gate held steady, its power surging as the sequence completed. A brilliant flash of light erupted from the center of the gate, blinding everyone in the room. Lena shielded her eyes, her heart pounding in her chest. For a moment she thought they had failed, that the gate was going to explode in a violent burst of energy. But then the light began to dissipate, and in its place a swirling vortex of energy formed at the center of the gate, a rift opening in the fabric of space itself. The team stared in awe at the sight before them. The rift shimmered with a strange, otherworldly light, its edges rippling like the surface of a pond disturbed by a stone. Beyond the rift they could see stars, distant worlds, and unknown realms of space. Lena felt a sense of exhilaration wash over her. They had done it. The gate was open. But her triumph was short-lived as the sound of explosions echoed in the distance. The Havan fleet was getting closer. "We don't have much time," Lena said, her voice urgent. "Get ready to move. We have to make sure the portal stays open long enough for reinforcements to come through." Ilara and the rest of the team scrambled to adjust the power levels, ensuring that the rift would remain stable enough for the portal to function. Lena watched, her heart racing as the rift remained open, the swirling energy within it pulsing like a heartbeat. They had opened a gateway to the unknown, and it was their only chance at survival. Kallaran was teetering on the brink of annihilation. The Havan fleet had surrounded the planet, their massive ships forming an unbreakable blockade in space. The people of Kallaran were in a state of panic, their once peaceful world now a chaotic battlefield. Streets that had once been filled with laughter and life were now empty, the silence broken only by the distant rumble of explosions and the echo of military commands. The government had mobilized every available soldier, but their efforts were futile. In the heart of the city, at the ancient temple housing the space gate, Lena Arcan and her team worked furiously, their every move filled with a sense of urgency. The ancient space gate was their last hope, but time was slipping away. They had already spent hours trying to activate the gate, but the power levels were unstable, and the ancient technology was more temperamental than they had anticipated. Ilara worked frantically at the terminal, sweat beading on her forehead as she adjusted the energy conduits. "The system is almost at full power, Lena," she said, her voice tight with strain. "But something's not right. The readings are fluctuating. If we push it too far, we might overload the entire system." Lena looked at the screen where a map of the planet was displayed. The Havan fleet was inching closer to the surface with each passing minute. The explosions in the distance were a constant reminder of the enemy's relentless advance. Lena knew that they were running out of time. The portal had to be activated before the enemy reached them. "Push it further," Lena said, her voice firm with resolve. "We don't have the luxury of waiting for the readings to stabilize. We either get this working now or Kallaran falls." Ilara hesitated for a moment, her eyes flicking to the terminal's warning signs, but then she nodded fingers, flying over the controls. Increasing power output. The room hummed with the sound of the machine as energy surged through the system. Lena stepped back, watching with bated breath. Every second felt like an eternity. They had no backup plan, no escape route if this failed. The gate was their only hope, and the stakes had never been higher. Outside, the skies had darkened, the sun obscured by the massive ships of the Havan fleet. The once beautiful planet was now under siege, the vast forests and peaceful oceans replaced by the fires of war. Lena knew that the people of Kallaran were counting on her and her team to succeed. Failure was not an option. "How much longer?" Lena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ilara glanced at the terminal, her face pale with exhaustion. "We're close, Lena. The system is stabilizing. But there's still one final sequence we need to activate. If we do this wrong..." Lena's heart raced as the weight of the situation bore down on her. She knew that every step they took from here on out was a gamble. One wrong move could mean the end of Kallaran. "Just do it," Lena said, her voice steely. "We don't have time to second-guess ourselves." Ilara nodded, and with a deep breath she initiated the final sequence. The machine hummed louder, and the air in the room seemed to vibrate with the immense power coursing through the system. Lena held her breath as the lights above them flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The ground beneath their feet shook as the energy output surged, and for a moment Lena feared the entire facility would collapse. But then, with a final resounding hum, the system stabilized. The gate's surface began to glow, and the swirling vortex of energy at its center intensified. Lena stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the glowing symbols as they lit up one by one. She had seen these symbols before in the ancient texts. Each one represented a crucial step in the activation process. For a moment, Lena dared to hope. Maybe, just maybe, they had done it. The gate was opening, but then a loud explosion shook the building, sending a wave of dust and debris flying through the room. Lena stumbled, her heart pounding in her chest. "Get down!" she shouted, pulling Ilara to the ground as another explosion rocked the facility. The walls cracked and groaned as the Havan bombardment grew closer. Lena's mind raced. They had activated the gate, but would it be enough? Would reinforcements arrive in time to save them? Or was this all for nothing? Another explosion tore through the building, this time shaking the very foundations. The room flickered as the lights died, leaving them in complete darkness. Lena could hear the distant rumble of the Havan fleet closing in their weapons, ready to annihilate everything in their path. "We need to hold this," Lena said, her voice shaking with a mix of fear and determination. "We can't let the gate collapse now." Ilara nodded, her face pale but resolute. "I'm trying to stabilize it. Just hold on a little longer." The minutes felt like hours as the ground continued to shake, each explosion sending shockwaves through the building. Lena's thoughts were a blur, but one thing was certain: if they didn't succeed, Kallaran would be lost. The lives of millions hung in the balance. Outside, the enemy's forces were almost upon them. The final moments of the battle for Kallaran had arrived. Lena closed her eyes for a moment, drawing a steadying breath. She had to believe in the plan. She had to believe that the portal would hold long enough for reinforcements to arrive. If not, then Kallaran's fate was sealed. But there was no time for doubt. The enemy was closing in, and the gate had to stay open. The survival of Kallaran depended on it. The ship that emerged from the portal was more than just a vessel. It was a symbol, a sign that their world was not alone in the universe. The Novar had arrived, but not as simple saviors. No, they had a deeper purpose, one that Lena and her team were only beginning to comprehend. As the Novar ship descended, a massive ramp extended from its belly, touching the ground of Kallaran's temple. From it, a group of beings, tall and imposing, began to descend. They were the Novar military forces, soldiers unlike any that Kallaran had ever seen. Their armor shimmered with an ethereal glow, each soldier moving with precision and grace, their eyes focused and alert. At the forefront of the group was Vela Orith, the commander of the Novar forces. She was taller than the others, her presence commanding her armor, reflecting the light of the portal as she moved forward with purposeful strides. She was the one who had led this force through the portal, and now she was the one who would explain to Lena and her team the real purpose behind their arrival. Lena's heart pounded as she watched Vela approach. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for. The Nova were here to help, but they weren't simply offering assistance out of kindness. They had come for a reason, one that had far-reaching consequences for the future of the galaxy. Vela stopped before Lena and her team, her expression unreadable. She studied them for a moment, as if assessing their worth before speaking in a voice that was calm, yet authoritative. "I am Vela Oreth," she began, "commander of the Novar forces. We have come to aid you, but understand this. Their true purpose is not solely to protect your planet." Lena took a step forward, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice steady, despite the questions swirling in her mind. Vela's gaze remained fixed on Lena as she spoke again, her voice unwavering. The threat that was coming to Kallaran was but a small part of a much larger picture. The forces that you face the Haven are not the true danger to this universe. They are only a symptom, a precursor to something far more catastrophic. Lena felt a chill run down her spine. She had known that the stakes were high, but this was more than she could have imagined. The Nova were not here just to stop the Havan. They had a far greater mission, one that involved the very fabric of the universe itself. "Then what is the true danger?" Lena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vela's eyes seemed to darken as she spoke. "The true danger is the unraveling of the space-time continuum itself. The collapse of one world can trigger a chain reaction, a ripple that spreads across the galaxy and beyond. And when this happens, the very structure of reality itself begins to break down. We have come to stop this from happening." Lena blinked, trying to process the weight of Vela's words. The very structure of reality itself. How was that even possible? "And how do you plan to stop it?" Lena asked, her curiosity overwhelming her fear. "What can you possibly do to prevent something like that?" Vela's expression softened slightly. "We are not the only ones who can manipulate the fabric of reality. There are other beings far older than even the Novar, who have the power to tear the fabric of space-time apart. These beings seek to unravel the universe, to create chaos and destruction. They are the ones who we fear the most." Lena felt her mind spinning as she tried to understand this new threat. If the Havan were only a small part of a larger, more terrifying force, then what chance did they stand against it? "You mentioned that the collapse of Kallaran would trigger a chain reaction," Lena said, her voice shaking slightly. "What exactly are you saying, that Kallaran is the key to all of this?" Vela nodded. "Yes, Kallaran is a nexus point, a critical point in the fabric of space-time. Its destruction would have created a rift, a tear, that would have allowed the ancient beings to enter your universe. Once they crossed over, it would have been impossible to stop them. But now that we have arrived, we can prevent the collapse, for now." Lena felt a wave of relief wash over her, but it was quickly replaced by a deep sense of unease. They had stopped one threat, but there were still others out there lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. "So what happens now?" Lena asked, her voice filled with a mix of fear and determination. Vela's gaze remained steady as she answered. "Now we begin the real work. We will work together to stabilize the fabric of space-time, to ensure that the collapse does not spread. But this is just the beginning. There will be more challenges ahead, more threats to face, and we will need your help." Lena nodded slowly. "We're ready," she said, her voice firm. "We'll do whatever it takes." Vela nodded, her expression unreadable. "Good. Then let's begin." As Vela turned and began to give orders to her troops, Lena felt the weight of the responsibility settle on her shoulders. The future of the galaxy was uncertain, but one thing was clear: they were not alone. And together they would fight to protect everything they held dear. The battle between the Novar and Havan forces unfolded quickly, with the Novar demonstrating their overwhelming military superiority. It was as if the very landscape of Kallaran had changed in an instant, from one of desperation and fear to one of controlled chaos and overwhelming force. The Novar soldiers moved with precision, their advanced technology giving them an edge that was immediately apparent. For the first time in a long while, Kallaran's defenders saw what real power looked like. The Novar deployed weapons and tools that defied every expectation. Energy weapons, sleek and deadly, hummed with a power that Kallaran's military had never seen before. The projectiles shot through the air like lightning, disintegrating everything in their path, leaving only smoldering ruins behind. Even the advanced systems of Kallaran's military forces couldn't stand up to the onslaught. The Havan forces, still reeling from the surprise of Nova's arrival, had no idea how to respond. As the Novar forces pushed forward, the ground beneath them cracked and trembled, shaking as though the very earth was quaking under the power of their weapons. The air was filled with the sound of battle explosions, cries, and the low hum of energy discharges. The Havan forces tried to fight back, but their weapons were ineffective against the overwhelming technological might of the Novar. The Novar fighters moved through the battlefield with fluid precision. Their battle tactics were unlike anything Kallaran had ever seen. No unnecessary movements, no wasted effort. Each strike was calculated, each maneuver designed to inflict maximum damage. It was like watching a predator hunting its prey, a force of nature that could not be stopped. "Look at them," Jorik said in awe, his voice shaking slightly. "They're unstoppable." Lena watched wide-eyed as the Havan forces were pushed back. The sight was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. She had never seen a military force operate with such efficiency. The Havan were tough, but they were outclassed in every sense of the word. There was no contest. The Novar soldiers used technology that seemed almost magical. Holograms appeared out of thin air, creating decoys and misdirecting the Havan troops. Anti-gravity devices allowed the Novar to move with incredible speed, making them nearly impossible to hit. Their weapons were silent but deadly, firing bolts of energy that could tear through solid rock with ease. Lena had never seen anything like it. The sheer power of the Novar's technology was staggering, and it was clear that Kallaran's military, despite its best efforts, would not have lasted long against such an opponent. As the battle raged on and the Havan forces began to retreat, they had lost their momentum and were now being pushed back to the outskirts of the battlefield. The Novar, with their superior tactics and technology, had quickly turned the tide in their favor. "Fall back!" One of the Havan commanders shouted, his voice laced with desperation. "We need to regroup. We can't win this fight." The Havan forces, disorganized and demoralized, began to retreat, leaving behind a battlefield littered with the wreckage of their machines and the bodies of their soldiers. It was clear that the Novar had won, but Lena couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The Novar had saved Kallaran, yes, but at what cost? As the battlefield cleared, the Novar soldiers began to withdraw as well, their mission completed. They had stopped the Havan, but there was still so much they hadn't shared. What was their true purpose? What was behind their intervention? Vela O'Reith, the commander of the Novar forces, approached Lena and her team, her expression unreadable. She didn't speak at first, but her presence was enough to make Lena and Jorik fall silent. "We've won the battle," Vela said, her voice calm and authoritative. "But this war is far from over." Lena nodded, her mind racing. There were so many questions, so many things they still didn't understand. The Novar were a powerful ally, but they had their own agenda, and Lena wasn't sure what that agenda was. "What happens now?" Lena asked, her voice steady, despite the uncertainty that filled her heart. Vela's gaze remained fixed on her. "Now we prepare. The Havan were just one force, but there are others out there. The battle for the future of your galaxy is only just beginning." Lena stood there for a moment, processing Vela's words. The Novar had saved them today, but what would tomorrow bring? And how much did the Novar know that they hadn't shared yet? The battle was over, but the war, whatever it was, had just begun. Lena stood quietly in the command room, staring at the holographic displays flickering before her. The constant flow of data filled the air, overwhelming her senses, but nothing felt as intense as the realization that had just dawned on her. The Novar were not simply here to save Kallaran. They were here because of something much larger, something that affected the very fabric of the universe. Kallaran's role in this grander cosmic play was far beyond her comprehension. Vela O'Reith stood before her posture commanding as always, her face unreadable. But now there was something more in her eyes, a quiet urgency, as if the weight of what was coming pressed heavily on her shoulders. "The Havan were never the true threat." Vela spoke, her voice low but steady. "They are pawns, tools used by forces much greater than themselves." Lena blinked in confusion. "What do you mean? Who are these forces?" Vela sighed, her gaze shifting to the holographic displays before her. "The forces behind the Havan are the Architects of Entropy, beings that exist outside of time and space, older than your galaxy and the very concept of existence itself. They once ruled everything, but their power became so great that they began to unravel the fabric of reality. They seek to return and restore their dominion over all things, and Kallaran is a key to their return. Lena struggled to process the enormity of this revelation. The Architects of Entropy and Kallaran. Kallaran is the key. Yes, Vela replied, her voice tinged with a sorrow that made the air around them feel colder. Kallaran is situated at a convergence point in the space-time continuum. It is more than just a planet. It is a vital point in the structure of reality itself. If it were destroyed, the rupture would create a tear in the very fabric of space and time, opening the gates for the architects to return. Lena could hardly believe what she was hearing. The weight of it all was almost too much to bear. A single planet's destruction could undo the very fabric of reality. It seemed impossible, yet the evidence was right in front of her. But why Kallaran? Why is it so important? Vela's expression softened as she continued. Kallaran is positioned at the center of an interdimensional web. The energies that flow through it govern the balance of reality itself. It is connected to the very foundation of space and time. If it falls, the web will unravel, causing a ripple effect that could undo the entire universe. We've been watching it for centuries, waiting for the right moment to intervene. Lena's mind raced. She tried to imagine what the destruction of Kallaran could mean. And the Havan, are they just a distraction? Vela nodded grimly. The Havan are merely pawns. They were manipulated into attacking Kallaran, but their real mission is to weaken the planet to create a breach. They were not meant to succeed. The true enemy is far more dangerous, and the Havan are merely a stepping stone to create chaos, to weaken the fabric of space-time in preparation for the return of the architects. So the Novar's role is to stop the Architects of Entropy from returning, Lena said, piecing the information together. But how do we stop them? How do we protect Kallaran from something so immense? Vela's expression grew even harder. We can delay their return, but we cannot stop them entirely. The rift will open no matter what. But if we strengthen Kallaran, stabilize the energy at the convergence point, we can buy the galaxy time. Time to prepare, time to fight. But the war, Lena, has only just begun. Lena felt a deep gnawing fear inside her. She had always known that space was vast, full of mysteries. But this was something far beyond anything she had ever imagined. What will happen to Kallaran if we fail? She asked, her voice small, uncertain. Vela's gaze softened slightly. If we fail, it is not just Kallaran that falls, it is the universe itself. The architects will return, and there will be no stopping them. This is the battle that must be fought, and we will fight it together. Lena stood quietly in the command room, staring at the holographic displays flickering before her. The constant flow of data filled the air, overwhelming her senses, but nothing felt as intense as the realization that had just dawned on her. The Novar were not simply here to save Kallaran. They were here because of something much larger, something that affected the very fabric of the universe. Kallaran's role in this grander cosmic play was far beyond her comprehension. Vela Orith stood before her posture commanding as always, her face unreadable. But now there was something more in her eyes, a quiet urgency, as if the weight of what was coming pressed heavily on her shoulders. The Havan were never the true threat. Vela spoke, her voice low but steady. They are pawns, tools used by forces much greater than themselves. Lena blinked in confusion. What do you mean, who are these forces? Vela sighed, her gaze shifting to the holographic displays before her. The forces behind the Havan are the Architects of Entropy, beings that exist outside of time and space, older than your galaxy, and the very concept of existence itself. They once ruled everything, but their power became so great that they began to unravel the fabric of reality. They seek to return and restore their dominion over all things, and Kallaran is a key to their return. Lena struggled to process the enormity of this revelation. The Architects of Entropy and Kallaran. Kallaran is the key. Yes, Vela replied, her voice tinged with a sorrow that made the air around them feel colder. Kallaran is situated at a convergence point in the space-time continuum. It is more than just a planet. It is a vital point in the structure of reality itself. If it were destroyed, the rupture would create a tear in the very fabric of space and time, opening the gates for the architects to return. Lena could hardly believe what she was hearing. The weight of it all was almost too much to bear. A single planet's destruction could undo the very fabric of reality. It seemed impossible, yet the evidence was right in front of her. But why Kallaran? Why is it so important? Vela's expression softened as she continued. Kallaran is positioned at the center of an interdimensional web. The energies that flow through it govern the balance of reality itself. It is connected to the very foundation of space and time. If it falls, the web will unravel, causing a ripple effect that could undo the entire universe. We've been watching it for centuries, waiting for the right moment to intervene. Lena's mind raced. She tried to imagine what the destruction of Kallaran could mean. And the Havan, are they just a distraction? Vela nodded grimly. The Havan are merely pawns. They were manipulated into attacking Kallaran. But their real mission is to weaken the planet to create a breach. They were not meant to succeed. The true enemy is far more dangerous, and the Havan are merely a stepping stone to create chaos, to weaken the fabric of space-time in preparation for the return of the Architects. So the Novar's role is to stop the Architects of Entropy from returning, Lena said, piecing the information together. But how do we stop them? How do we protect Kallaran from something so immense? Vela's expression grew even harder. We can delay their return, but we cannot stop them entirely. The rift will open no matter what. But if we strengthen Kallaran, stabilize the energy at the convergence point, we can buy the galaxy time. Time to prepare, time to fight. But the war, Lena, has only just begun. Lena felt a deep gnawing fear inside her. She had always known that space was vast, full of mysteries. But this was something far beyond anything she had ever imagined. What will happen to Kallaran if we fail? She asked, her voice small, uncertain. Vela's gaze softened slightly. If we fail, it is not just Kallaran that falls, it is the universe itself. The Architects will return, and there will be no stopping them. This is the battle that must be fought, and we will fight it together. The victory of Novar was undeniable. The Havan forces had been decisively repelled, their attempts to break through Kallaran's defenses utterly crushed. The battlefield, once filled with the chaos of war, now lay silent. But as the last remnants of Havan's forces retreated, Lena and Jorik both realized that their victory, though significant, was not the end. The true threat, they now understood, lay far beyond the immediate battle. As the Novar soldiers began to regroup and prepare for what came next, Lena felt a growing sense of unease. She turned to Jorik, who had been silent for some time, staring at the distant horizon. "Jorik," Lena said quietly, her voice filled with a mix of concern and disbelief. "Do you think this is really over? The Haven may have been stopped, but I feel like there's something bigger at play here." Jorik turned to face her, his brow furrowed. "I know what you mean. Something doesn't feel right." He looked back towards the Novar forces, then to the horizon where the remnants of the battlefield still smoldered. "But what else could there be? We've stopped them. The Havan won't be able to attack again anytime soon." "It's not just the Havan," Lena said, her voice barely a whisper. "There's something more. Something beyond them. Vela warned us that the Havan were only a tool. The real danger is what comes next." Jorik turned his gaze to the horizon again, as though hoping the answer might reveal itself in the distance. "But what are we supposed to do? How do we prepare for something we don't even understand yet?" "I don't know," Lena said, feeling the weight of uncertainty press on her chest. "But I do know one thing. Whatever it is, it's tied to the rift. If we don't fix it, it will only get worse. And that is something we can't ignore." The rift, the tear in space-time that had been created by the attack on Kallaran, was still present. It was unstable, slowly expanding, as though something just beyond the fabric of reality was pushing to break through. "If we don't stop it, the universe will be torn apart," Lena continued, her voice steady but filled with growing dread. "The Architects, they're out there, waiting for the rift to open wide enough for them to pass through." Jorik's face tightened with realization. "You think they were behind this from the beginning, don't you?" he asked quietly. Lena nodded slowly. "Yes. The Havan were merely the first wave. They were a distraction, a way to weaken Kallaran and open the rift. But the true threat lies on the other side. The Architects of Entropy, they want to destroy everything. They'll use this rift to invade our universe and spread their destruction." "So what now?" Jorik asked, his voice heavy with the weight of what they had just learned. How do we stop something that powerful? We can't stop it alone, Lena said firmly. We need the Novar. We need to work together to stabilize the rift and prevent the architects from coming through. Jorik was silent for a long moment, then nodded. So we prepare. We stabilize the rift and we face whatever comes next. Exactly, Lena replied. We don't know what's coming, but we know we need to be ready. She turned toward the team now gathering in the command center. We'll need all the help we can get. The future of the universe is at stake. As Lena looked around the room, she saw the weight of the situation reflected in everyone's eyes. The gravity of their task had become all too clear. The battle was far from over, and the universe itself was at stake. The war against the Architects of Entropy had begun. And this time it would be a fight not just for one planet, but for the survival of everything. Lena could feel the weight of the truth pressing down on her. She had always seen Novar as the saviors, the ones who came in the nick of time to protect Kallaran from destruction. But now standing in front of Vela, the commander of the Novar forces, the truth was becoming clearer, and it was far from what she had imagined. Novar are not here to save you, Vela said, her voice cold and distant. We are not your saviors. We are here to prevent the collapse of your planet not out of kindness, but because the consequences of Kallaran's destruction would be far worse than you can comprehend. Lena felt a chill run down her spine. She had never considered that the Novar might not be the heroes she had hoped for. But the more she listened, the more the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. You don't understand, do you? Vela's tone softened slightly, but there was no warmth in it. If Kallaran is destroyed, the resulting gravitational anomaly will tear apart the fabric of space-time itself. It will create a rift, a tear in the universe that could allow other forces to slip through. Forces that even we fear. Forces far older and far more powerful than anything you've ever faced. Lena's stomach twisted. She couldn't fathom the scale of what Vela was describing. Forces beyond imagination and the universe itself in peril. It sounded like something out of a nightmare. Yet here she was, standing in the middle of it. So you're telling me that Kallaran's destruction will open a gateway for these forces to invade? Lena asked, her voice shaking with a mix of fear and disbelief. Yes, Vela replied, her face hardening as she spoke. Kallaran sits at a unique point in the galaxy, a nexus of sorts. If it falls, the energy released will rip apart the local space-time continuum and cause a chain reaction. The rift created will attract entities from beyond our understanding, and they will be unstoppable. This is why we had to act. You think we came here to protect your people, but no. We came to protect the galaxy from what Kallaran's destruction could unleash. Lena's mind was reeling. It was too much to take in, too many questions and no clear answers. Why hadn't Novar told them this sooner? Why hadn't they prepared them for the magnitude of what was happening? And what happens if you fail? Lena asked, her voice barely above a whisper, the fear settling in as she realized the full scope of the situation. Vela's expression remained unchanged, but her eyes were filled with something darker, something akin to resignation. If we fail, Kallaran's destruction will create a chain reaction. A rift will form, and that rift will attract the ancient forces we fear. The galaxy will be plunged into chaos, and no one will be safe. Not even the Novar. This is why we cannot afford to fail. And what do you want from us? Lena asked, her voice heavy with both defiance and dread. What's the catch? Vela took a step forward, her gaze unwavering. The price of our intervention is this: Kallaran will be under Novar's watch forever. We will never leave. We will remain here, watching over the planet, ensuring that the rift never forms. You may think you're free, but you will never be free of us. Lena's breath caught in her throat. The weight of what Vela was saying was suffocating. The price for the survival of Kallaran was the perpetual presence of Novar. They would never be able to truly live free again. Why are you telling me this? Lena asked, her voice shaking as a sudden wave of despair washed over her. Why not just keep controlling us without telling us the truth? Vela paused for a moment, her cold eyes watching Lena with an unreadable expression. Because you deserve to know. You need to understand the cost of your planet's survival. Kallaran is important, but the galaxy is more important. We can't risk the greater universe for the sake of one planet. Lena's mind spun as she processed the enormity of it all. She had thought they were the heroes, the ones who would save her people. But now she saw that they were the ones deciding what the price of survival truly was. Kallaran would live, but it would never be the same. Lena and Jorik stood in the command center, the weight of the last few hours pressing down on them. The reality of the situation was becoming clearer, but the questions were only multiplying. Novar had come to Kallaran with a purpose that extended far beyond the defense of their planet. And as much as Lena hated to admit it, she had to accept that Novar's intervention might be the only thing standing between the galaxy and utter annihilation. "I don't like it," Lena said, breaking the silence. Her eyes were fixed on the glowing map of Kallaran, but her mind was elsewhere, grappling with everything she had just learned. "I don't like that we're pawns in their game." Jorik stood beside her, arms crossed, his face set in a grim expression. He had always been the pragmatic one, but even he couldn't deny the weight of Novar's intentions. "You're not wrong," he said quietly, "but sometimes you have to accept the hard truths. We don't have a choice here. We can either fight for survival or let everything fall apart." Lena sighed, rubbing her temples as she tried to focus. The weight of the situation was overwhelming. They were facing an enemy they couldn't even comprehend, and yet here they were relying on the very people who had caused this chaos. "We're stuck," Lena muttered. "We don't even know what's really going on." Jorik turned to face her, his eyes meeting hers. "Do you trust them?" he asked. It was a question that had been lingering in the air between them for some time, and now it had to be asked. Lena hesitated. She wanted to say no, but deep down she knew the answer wasn't that simple. "I don't trust them," she finally said, her voice quiet. "But I don't know if we have any other choice. If they're right about the forces they're trying to stop, we might be looking at the end of everything." Jorik nodded slowly, a grim look on his face. "That's the problem. Novar isn't just protecting Kallaran, they're protecting the entire galaxy, whether we like it or not. If they fail, the consequences will be worse than anything we've ever faced." Lena stood silent for a moment, the full weight of their situation sinking in. She couldn't deny it, Jorik was right. If Novar failed, the galaxy would be swallowed by forces that would leave nothing behind. The end was not just near, it was inevitable. "So what now?" Lena asked, her voice firm. "What do we do?" Jorik thought for a moment before answering. "We keep fighting. We follow Novar's plan. We can't afford to be divided on this. Our survival depends on their success, and that means we need to support them, even if it feels like we're being controlled." "And what if we can't trust them?" Lena asked, the doubt still lingering in her voice. "What if we're just pawns in their game, nothing more than tools to them?" Jorik looked at her, his expression hard. "Then we fight as we always have," he said. "But if we want a chance to win, we need to put aside our doubts and work with them. This is bigger than us, Lena. It's bigger than Kallaran." Lena stared at him, seeing the resolve in his eyes. He was right. They didn't have the luxury of doubt anymore. If they wanted to survive, they had to face the truth and stand with Novar, no matter how uncomfortable that might be. "So what's the plan?" she asked finally, accepting that they had no other choice but to follow the path Novar had laid out for them. "We fight," Jorik said, his voice steady. "We fight to survive, and we fight to ensure that Kallaran doesn't fall. We fight to give Novar the chance to stop whatever is coming. And we fight because if we don't, everything will be lost." Lena nodded, her resolve hardening. It was time to stop questioning and start fighting. The galaxy's fate rested on their shoulders, and they couldn't afford to fail. Kallaran had survived the attack from Havan, but the cost was steep. The planet's defenses had been breached, its cities devastated, and much of its population had been left to pick up the pieces. But the true price of survival was far greater than anyone could have imagined. The Novar had intervened, but their presence on Kallaran would leave an indelible mark on the planet and on its people. Lena stood at the edge of the ruined city, looking out over the broken landscape. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the wreckage of what had once been a thriving metropolis. It should have been a moment of relief Kallaran had survived the war, but instead there was only a deep sense of unease. "We made it," Jorik said, his voice rough, as he joined her. He looked out at the same landscape, his face marked by exhaustion and a hard, resigned look. "But at what cost?" Lena didn't answer right away. She couldn't. The cost was not something she could articulate, not yet. The war with Havan had been brutal, but now they faced something even more terrifying, the long-term consequences of Novar's intervention. "They're not leaving," Lena said quietly, her gaze still fixed on the horizon. "Novar, they won't leave us alone." "No," Jorik replied, his voice flat. And we can't make them. The truth had been laid bare to them. Novar's presence on Kallaran was not temporary. They had come to ensure that the rift in space-time was sealed. They had come to keep Kallaran under constant watch, preventing any future threats from exploiting the tear in the fabric of the universe. But the price of their intervention was that Kallaran would forever be under Novar's supervision. We can't just go back to the way things were. Lena murmured, her voice barely a whisper. Everything has changed. Jorik nodded slowly, his eyes shadowed with thought. I don't know if we ever could, he said quietly. Novar's presence changes everything. They're not just watching us, they're in control. And I don't know if we'll ever get that control back. What happens now? Lena asked, her voice trembling. What are we supposed to do? We rebuild. Jorik said, his voice firm despite the uncertainty in his eyes. We rebuild and we adapt. That's all we can do now. Kallaran survived, but it won't be the same. We can't undo what's happened, but we can move forward. Lena closed her eyes, trying to push back the overwhelming flood of emotions. The Novar had saved Kallaran from destruction, but they had also condemned it to a future of uncertainty and surveillance. The planet was safe, but its people were no longer free. We have to find a way to live with them. Lena said at last, her voice quiet but determined. We have to find a way to survive under their watch, because whether we like it or not, they're not going anywhere. Jorik looked at her, a flicker of respect in his eyes. We will, he said, his voice steady. We always do. The future of Kallaran was uncertain. The planet had survived the war, but at a price that no one had been prepared for. Novar's control would shape everything from this point forward, and the people of Kallaran would have to learn to adapt to a new way of life, one where freedom was a distant memory. We'll make it, Lena said softly, almost to herself. Somehow we'll make it. And with that, she turned away from the ruined city, walking toward the future that lay ahead, uncertain, but filled with the resolve to face whatever came next. Lena and Jorik stood together on the edge of Kallaran's capital, staring out at the horizon. The war with Havan had ended, but the true battle was only just beginning. They had saved their planet, but in doing so, they had opened a door to a future they could barely comprehend. The Novar had kept their word. Kallaran was no longer under immediate threat, but the cost of their intervention was far more profound. The rift in space-time had been sealed, but it was only a matter of time before other, more dangerous forces would take notice. We've won, Lena said, but her voice lacked conviction. But at what cost? Jorik looked at her, his expression unreadable. He knew what she meant. They had saved Kallaran, but they had also opened a door to unknown dangers. The cost is more than we can see right now, he said, but the truth is we can never go back. The universe has changed, and we have to adapt. Lena turned away from the horizon, her gaze focused on the ruins of the capital. We stopped Havan, but we didn't defeat them, she said softly. They're still out there, waiting for their chance. And there are worse things out there, aren't there? Jorik nodded gravely. Yes, Havan is just the beginning. We may have repelled them, but there are greater forces in the universe. Novar warned us, but I don't think we truly understand the scale of what's coming. The realization hit Lena hard. They had thought their greatest threat was the Havan Empire, but now they knew that the true danger lay beyond the stars. It wasn't just Havan they had to worry about. The universe was full of unknown entities, some of which were far more powerful and far more dangerous than anything they had ever faced. We've opened a Pandora's box, Lena said quietly, and we don't even know what's inside. That's what Novar wanted to protect us from, Jorik replied, his tone grim. They came to stop Kallaran from falling, but it's not just Kallaran that was in danger. The entire galaxy is on the verge of chaos, and we have no idea how deep it goes. Lena took a deep breath, trying to calm the rising panic inside her. What are we supposed to do? Jorik didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked over to a nearby console and began typing. We need to prepare. Kallaran is no longer just a planet. It's a beacon, a target for anyone who wants to take advantage of the rift. So we fight, Lena asked. That's all we can do. We fight and we keep fighting, Jorik said, turning back to her. But it won't be like before. The universe is much bigger than we thought, and there are powers out there that we can't even begin to comprehend. But we have no choice. We can't run from this. Lena nodded, her heart heavy. She had always known that humanity's struggle for survival would never be easy, but now she understood that the challenges ahead were far greater than anything she had ever imagined. "We have to prepare for the worst," she said quietly. "We can't afford to be caught off guard again." Jorek nodded in agreement. The Havan Empire was just the beginning. The real war is out there beyond the stars, and we're not ready for it. But we will be. We'll rebuild, and we'll be ready for whatever comes next. "We'll need allies," Lena said, her mind already racing through the possibilities. "We can't fight this war alone." "Agreed," Jorek replied. "But who can we trust? The galaxy is a much darker place now. Trust will be harder to come by." The two of them stood there in silence, watching the stars twinkle above them. The universe was vast, and the dangers were innumerable. But they knew one thing for certain: they were no longer fighting for just their planet. They were fighting for the survival of everything. The dust had settled on Kallaran, and the sky above was quiet once again. The war with Havan was over, and Nova had completed their mission. The rift was sealed, and the forces that threatened the universe had been kept at bay for now. But as Lena and Jorek stood on the observation deck looking out over their world, they knew that their planet would never be the same. Nova was leaving. Their ship, sleek and silent, had already begun their departure. The alien forces who had come to save them were now retreating, leaving Kallaran under their eternal watch. Lena and Jorek had been told that their planet would remain under Novar's surveillance forever. It was the price of survival. "I thought it would be easier," Lena said quietly, her voice filled with a mixture of relief and sorrow. "We survived, but at what cost?" Jorek glanced at her, his eyes hard. "We made it through," he said, "but we're not free. Not really." Lena nodded slowly, her gaze drifting to the horizon. "No, we're not free. Kallaran is alive, but the cost is too high." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of everything that had happened settling heavily on them. The war, the intervention of Novar, the forces they had faced, and those yet to come, it was all so much to process. And yet, despite everything, they had no answers. "The universe has changed," Jorek said after a long pause. "We've seen the beginning of something much larger. Havan was just one part of it, but there are more forces out there, and they won't stop. This fight is far from over." Lena looked at him, the weight of his words sinking in. She had known this, of course, but hearing it from Jorek made it feel more real. There was no safety, no certainty anymore. The universe was vast and filled with dangers they could not even imagine. "But we have to keep fighting," she said, her voice steady now despite the uncertainty ahead. "We have no choice." "Yes," Jorek replied. "We fight because that's all we can do. But we also need to prepare. This is bigger than us. The galaxy is changing, and we need to change with it. Kallaran might have survived this time, but what about the next time?" They both turned their gaze back to the sky, the same sky that had witnessed the destruction of Kallaran's cities, the arrival of Novar, and the departure of those same forces that had once been their saviors. Now Kallaran would live, but it would never truly be free. "What happens now?" Lena asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "What happens to us?" Jorek looked at her, his eyes filled with a quiet resolve. "We survive," he said, "and we prepare for the future. There's no going back now. We'll have to face whatever comes next, no matter how dangerous, no matter how dark." The silence between them stretched out, each lost in their own thoughts about the uncertain future ahead. But in that moment, both Lena and Jorek knew that their world had changed forever. As the last of the Novar ships disappeared into the depths of space, Lena and Jorek stood together, watching as Kallaran, their home, moved into an uncertain future. The universe had opened a door to unknown possibilities, and now they would have to find a way to navigate the darkness that lay beyond. "The universe is vast," Lena said softly, her voice barely audible, "and it's full of dangers, but we'll face them together." Jorek nodded, the faintest trace of a smile on his lips. "Together," he echoed, "no matter what happens." And so, with the stars above them, the future of Kallaran and the universe remained uncertain. But for the first time in a long while, Lena and Jorek felt that they were ready to face it, whatever it might be. As the last of the Novar ships vanished into the stars, the quiet that followed felt more profound than ever. Kallaran had survived, but the scars left by the intervention of these mysterious alien beings would never fade. Lena and Jorek stood side by side, watching the planet below them, a planet that was now under the watchful eyes of forces far beyond their comprehension. The galaxy was vast, and its dangers were greater than they could ever have imagined. But in the face of this unknown future, there was only one thing that mattered. They would face it together. And no matter what lay ahead, Lena and Jorik knew that they were ready. The universe was filled with unanswered questions, and the fate of Kallaran remained uncertain. But for the first time in a long while, there was hope. A hope that they could make a difference in a galaxy that was on the brink of chaos. And that hope, fragile as it was enough to carry them forward.